It was dark outside the cave. A storm raged. Thunder and lightning made their presence known by light and sound, respectively. Inside the cave, he was worried. While he couldn't see the faces of his family members, he knew that they too must be worried, for they hadn't eaten in days. The cacophony of thunder was broken only by the scream and the sounds made by the prehistoric animals outside. Friends, of course, we are not talking about today, yesterday, or even a century before. We are talking about prehistoric times where man had to hunt for food, and man was a hunter-gatherer. He would hunt for food, eat, and then there were periods of starvation when there was no food available, and then he would eat again. And what happened during these periods of starvation? Well, once the human being was able to eat in those days, well, I don't even know if human beings were called human beings then, the prehistoric and the Neanderthal period, and I'm not an expert on that, but just to highlight that when people ate, the food was stored as glucose and then glycogen, which is a storage form of glucose. The excess food was also stored as fat and as protein, and the food was then used, the energy from the food was then used to switch on certain anti-aging genes and proteins which would make people stronger and fitter. But at the same time, during periods of starvation, the body would conserve energy. The body would use up the glycogen, the storage form of glucose, the fat tissue, the storage form of fat, and then of course the body would switch off certain bad proteins so that energy could be conserved. So during the periods of fasting, the bad proteins would be switched off, and storage forms of glucose and fat would be released for energy. And during the periods of feeding, the good proteins would be switched on and the food would be stored as glycogen or fat. This period of fasting and feasting was important from an evolutionary perspective. But in today's world, life is a celebration of eating punctuated by short periods of fasting. But is it possible that by going back to those prehistoric times, man can now, or men and women and human beings can recreate some of those benefits of fasting? Well, that's a question scientists are asking in the now well-established diet called intermittent fasting. Simply put, intermittent fasting is a period of fasting and then a short period of eating. There are different kinds of intermittent fasting, and my duty is only to give you a brief idea of what is intermittent fasting. One form of intermittent fasting is called the 5-2 fast, where in a week a person would eat normally for 5 days and then fast for 2 days. The other form of fasting is called the 16-8 fasting, where people would eat normally for 8 hours and then fast for 16 hours. Intermittent fasting has a lot of benefit, especially in people who would like to lose weight, because they do lose weight. It also has benefits on diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and even many other aspects of metabolic health and also other aspects of health. So should you all fast unto health? Well, we don't know the answer, but intermittent fasting seems to have some benefits. Scientists are beginning to unravel the biological mechanisms by which intermittent fasting could have benefits. For the moment, it's important to seek medical advice from your doctor and nutritionist, but remember, continuous eating will cause weight gain and is poor for metabolic health. So some discipline in fasting and eating on time is very important. So let's start by bringing that little discipline into our lives, where we eat on time and don't eat in the periods where we're not supposed to eat. And if you are a candidate for intermittent fasting, your doctor, your nutritionist, or even your reading of the literature may help you in deciding what's best for you. Thank you so much for listening to this video of mine. It has been a pleasure discussing this topic with you.